Let's start. Q Jump, 2021, 7. Page 34 Number 1. All that night I held onto the broken mast, until I was so exhausted that I finally went to sleep. The next morning I sat on the mast and looked around. There was nothing around as far as the eye could see. It was calm and the sea was like glass. A single seagull which came out of nowhere landed on the mast, looked at me questioningly, and then flew off into the distance. I wished that I could fly like that. If I could, I would fly over the ocean and find our ship, and Grandpa, Grandma, and all the others would be happy to see me. But there was no use in dreaming about things that were impossible. I sat on the mast, dangling my feet in the water. I thought about my friends on the ship and how they must think that I drowned in that storm. I thought about our island, and wondered if I would ever see another island again. Page 34 Number 2. At times, coaches are so focused on helping athletes improve that they take good performance efforts for granted. Non-reinforcement means failing to acknowledge athletes' effort, skill execution, and performance improvements. Have you ever failed to point out the positives because you were so focused on identifying what athletes needed to do to improve? It's an easy trap to fall into. Coaches who fail to provide reinforcement when it is warranted assume that athletes know their work is noticed and appreciated. In reality, when you fail to acknowledge strong effort and performance, this communicates a negative message to athletes, leaving them to question whether their effort and improvement are recognized and valued. Page 35 Number 3. The two tables above show the country of origin composition of the U.S. international student population in the school year 1979 to 1980 and in the school year 2014 to 2015. 1979 to 1980, 2014 to 2015. Iran, which was the top country of origin in 1979 to 1980, wasn't among the top 10 countries of origin for international students in 2014 to 2015, whereas the opposite was true for China. 1979 to 1980, 2014 to 2015 10. Taiwan, Canada, Japan, Saudi Arabia, and India were among the top 10 international student countries of origin both in 1979 to 1980 and in 2014 to 2015. 1979 to 1980, 2014 to 2015 10. Between the two school years, the number of students from India increased more than 13-fold. 13. In 1979 to 1980, the number of students from Nigeria was smaller than that of students from Hong Kong and Thailand combined. 1979 to 1980. In 2014 to 2015, the number of students from South Korea was more than 3 times larger than that of students from Vietnam. 2014 to 2015. Page 35 Number 4. Advertisers have hit on one particularly effective way of seeming to argue against their own interests. They mention a minor weakness or drawback of their product in the ads promoting it. That way, they create a perception of honesty from which they can be more persuasive about the strengths of the product. Advertisers are not alone in the use of this tactic. Attorneys are taught to steal the opponent's thunder by mentioning a weakness in their case before the opposing lawyer does, thereby establishing a perception of honesty in the eyes of jury members. Experiments have demonstrated that this tactic works. When jurors heard an attorney bring up a weakness in his own case first, jurors assigned him more honesty and were more favorable to his overall case in their final verdicts because of that perceived honesty. Page 36 Number 5. Arturo Toscanini had a phenomenal memory as well as a phenomenal ear. Arturo Toscanini. Once, he decided to conduct Ernest Schelling's impressions from an artist's life, and he invited Mr. Schelling himself to play solo piano. Ernest Schelling impressions from an artist's life, Schelling. During rehearsal, Maestro Toscanini, who never looked at a score during rehearsal, although he kept one on the stage, stopped Mr. Schelling and stated that he believed the pianist had omitted a G flat. Toscanini Schelling, Schelling, G. Mr. Schelling replied, "You are right. I did omit the G flat because I never wrote a G flat at that particular point in my original score. Schelling. GG. That surprised Maestro Toscanini, so he invited Mr. Schelling to look at the score with him. Toscanini, Schelling. After looking at the score, it was Mr. Schelling who was surprised, and he said, "Mr. Toscanini, I did omit the G flat. In all the times I have played this piece I always omitted the G flat. Since the day I wrote it, I had completely forgotten it was there." Schelling, Toscanini, G. 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 Page 36 number 6. The best example I can share with you of not letting outside factors control you is to think of the late-night hotel front desk clerk. This person is responsible for receiving guests who may have encountered any number of difficulties in their travels to the hotel. The clerk doesn't know any of this, and he or she certainly doesn't have any control over them, yet the guest could still choose to treat the clerk with less than courteous behavior. The guest isn't necessarily doing it intentionally, it's merely the culmination of a difficult day. Same thing goes for the response you may get to your phone call or email. The prospect may simply be responding to you in a manner that reflects other things going on in their life at that moment. Don't let their actions impact your actions. You're better than that, and you probably have not had the same type of day they've had. Page 37 number 7. Over half the human population of the planet now lives in cities, and the proportion is likely to continue to increase in the foreseeable future. Building in cities is becoming more and more important, and urban form and urban architecture are the focus of much debate. Some architects have decided to respond to what they perceive to be the potentially formless and anonymous nature of the city by creating buildings that are obviously strange and are intended to become urban landmarks. One of the simplest ways of making a building look unusual is to break the normal rules of structure, or at least make it seem as if gravity is of no consequence. Such buildings make difficult demands on structural engineers, who have to make paradoxical forms work while concealing how the trick is pulled off. Page 37 number 8. Several studies have investigated the cognition and perception of vocal lyrics in songs. Serafini and her colleagues studied the effect of lyrics on participants' memory for songs. Serafine. Results showed that melody recognition was near chance unless the melody's original words, i.e., words that were presented with the music during encoding, were present, suggesting that music and speech were combined into a single coherent object when encoded in the same stream. More recently, Weiss and his colleagues examined the effect of timbre, including voice, on memory and preference for music. Weiss. Results showed that melodies with the voice were better recognized than all other instrumental melodies. The authors suggest that the biological significance of the human voice provides a greater depth of processing and enhanced memory. The end. Good job.